I was never the chosen one. In my family, the spotlight had always belonged to my older brother James, the golden child, the heir, the obvious successor. Me, Maria. I was the one good with numbers, the girl with an MBA from UT Austin who somehow still got introduced at dinner parties as the helpful little sister. I wasn't jealous, or at least I didn't think I was. I worked hard, stayed quiet, and hoped that one day someone might notice. But in my family, humility wasn't a virtue. It was an excuse to overlook you. Our family business, Matthews & Sons Construction, was built by my father Thomas from the ground up, literally. What started as a one-man gig in South Austin became a multi-million-dollar firm with contracts across the state. But it was me, not James, who brought in the financial systems, negotiated our high-stake deals, and kept the company profitable through market downturns. After Wharton turned me down, I earned my degree here at home and came back to build something with meaning. James. He was the VP of Client Relations. That meant golf outings, steak dinners, and signing deals I had negotiated behind the scenes. Your brother brings in the business. Dad always reminded me when I voiced concerns. You do good work, Maria, important work, even if no one sees it. That was code for James gets the credit. I get the spreadsheet. Then James got engaged to Vanessa Caldwell, daughter of a luxury real estate mogul in Central Texas. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a merger. This is the future of our family, my mother whispered one night over dinner. I smiled, but something in my chest tightened. What I didn't know then was that this future would soon begin to erase my past and destroy the one place I thought I still belonged, my family. James and Vanessa's engagement party was held at the Caldwell family's lakeside estate on Lake Travis. I drove out alone wearing a navy dress I'd debated buying for weeks. I wasn't trying to stand out. I just wanted to show up with a little self-respect, at least for myself. But the moment I stepped through the gates, I felt out of place. Everything was extravagant imported champagne, a catered Italian buffet, and guests who all seemed to belong to the same luxury real estate circle. I was introduced repeatedly as James's sister, who does accounting for the family business. And every time I had to smile and correct them, actually, I'm the CFO. No one cared. The conversation would drift to bridal gowns, honeymoon villas, or some new Westlake development the Caldwells were spearheading. I was a backdrop, a detail, a footnote. Then I heard it. Stepping onto the terrace to catch a breath, I overheard Vanessa's mother murmuring to someone, "The Matthews Company has potential, but that sister, she's too attached to the numbers. No vision." Vanessa replied with a soft laugh. "We'll bring them up to standard after the wedding. Dad says their company has good bones, just needs structural adjustment." I froze. Adjustment. What kind of adjustment? I was the one who had built the entire financial structure of Matthews & Sons. I was the one who kept us afloat through the last downturn. But to them, I was just an inconvenience. Something to be managed, repositioned, or removed. I told myself they were just being snobs, elitist nonsense, but deep down I knew this wasn't just a wedding. It was a corporate acquisition dressed in white lace, and I wasn't part of the merger. The 6 months leading up to the wedding weren't marked by dramatic explosions. No, they were chipped away piece by piece like slow erosion. One polite insult at a time. I wasn't invited to be part of the bridal party. "We're keeping it intimate, just my closest friends," Vanessa had said. My mother parroted it like it had been carved in stone. Still, she insisted I go with them to see Vanessa try on dresses. I cleared my budget meeting just to show up. I spent the entire time perched on a velvet couch listening to Vanessa's friends murmur things like, "I admire career women who don't have time to shop. So brave not to care about fashion." Vanessa caught my eye in the mirror, smirked. I smiled back, a smile like ice. As the wedding approached, my father looked increasingly drained. I caught him wincing when he thought no one was watching. Once I saw him slip pills from his desk drawer and hide them. When I asked, he waved me off. Just age Maria. Don't fuss. But I did fuss. When I brought it up to Mom, she shut me down. Your father's fine. Don't create problems. Focus on supporting your brother's big day. James, meanwhile, started canceling our sibling lunches, something we'd done for years. First it was meetings, then Vanessa needs help with planning. Then, nothing. No calls, no texts. I finally got him to lunch. Just once. And when I carefully tried to express my concerns about Dad, about how things felt different, James glanced at his watch and sighed, "You always overthink. You're jealous, Maria, because something good is happening to me for once." It hit like a slap. He tossed cash on the table and walked away. I stayed seated numb. That day, I realized something bone deep. I was losing my brother and my family to people who saw me as nothing more than a problem to manage. James's wedding day arrived with the kind of blue sky that feels like a mockery. The venue was Vineyard Vista, one of Caldwell Properties' crown jewels perched in the hills west of Austin. Picture perfect, intentional. This wedding wasn't just a celebration, it was a corporate display of status. I wasn't part of the show. I arrived early as requested in a burgundy gown carefully chosen to fit the autumn theme. I'd even booked professional hair and makeup, a small indulgence to feel visible. Instead of being welcomed, I was handed a clipboard and sent to handle vendor mishaps. Wrong flower color, missing playlist, frantic calls. "I'm not part of the wedding staff," I said as politely as I could. "I'm the groom's sister." The planner barely looked up. "Vanessa said you're great with details. She designated you as point person for any issues." By the time I finished fixing their mess, the family photos had been taken without me. I found out as guests were being seated. "There you are!" My mother snapped, eyes narrowed. "We've been looking everywhere." "No one was looking," I said quietly. "I've been managing vendor chaos. That seems to be my assigned role." I entered the reception hall and searched for my place card. I checked once, then twice. Nothing. A server approached me. "Are you Maria Matthews? I believe you're seated in the kitchen annex." The kitchen annex. A side room near the catering station where staff took their breaks. One small table. My name card placed next to the wedding planner's and the photographer's assistant. No family. No friends. "Is something wrong?" The syrupy voice of Caroline Caldwell floated behind me. "Vanessa thought you might feel more comfortable here," she said sweetly. "No date always on work calls. This way you're close to staff. Managerial types belong near operations, don't they?" I looked across the room. James laughing at the head table. My parents beaming beside the Caldwells. No one intervened. That's when it hit me I wasn't family anymore. I was support staff. An invisible woman in burgundy. I left the wedding without saying goodbye. Not to my parents. Not to James. Not even to the ghost of who I thought I was in that family. I drove away from Vineyard Vista, hands clenched around the steering wheel. But I wasn't angry. Not exactly. It wasn't fire. It was something colder, heavier, like the stillness of a lake before a storm. I pulled over a few miles out, needing air clarity, anything. My phone buzzed. A text from James. "Stop making this about you." 5 words. Light as breath. Heavy as concrete. I stared at the screen. No apology. No acknowledgement. No question about how I'd been treated. No defense. No regret. Not even a hesitation about the fact that his sister had been seated with the catering staff at his wedding. Just a command. A shutdown. A confirmation that my role in this family had been downgraded to inconvenient background noise. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. That message said it all. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my apartment overlooking the city lights of Austin, thinking about every deal I'd helped secure for Matthews and Sons, every spreadsheet I'd balanced, every late night I'd spent protecting us from collapse. I had been the reason this company survived. I had grown it, protected it, defended it. I had stayed in Austin when I could have gone to Dallas to New York because I believed in something called family. And they gave me the kitchen, a condescending pat from James's future mother-in-law, and a text that slapped me harder than any insult ever could. I once believed I didn't need to fight to be respected. I was wrong, and I wasn't staying silent anymore. The week after the wedding, I buried myself in work. Not because there was too much to do, but because I needed something I could control. When emotions betrayed me, spreadsheets didn't. That Friday, while reviewing our quarterly financials, something caught my eye, a series of transfers to an unfamiliar account. Each amount just under $50,000, low enough to avoid triggering our system's automatic alerts. I dug deeper. Hours passed, and then it all unraveled. Nearly $2 million had been siphoned out of Matthews & Sons over the last 18 months. The money was funneled into a holding company registered to James, which had in turn invested in multiple Caldwell Properties developments. My hands trembled as I printed the documents. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't carelessness. It was deliberate. A slow, strategic drain of company funds. A hidden pipeline fueling a merger I hadn't even known was coming. I walked straight into my father's office. He looked worn, distant. I placed the papers in front of him. I expected shock or fury. Instead, he sighed. I wondered when you'd find this. I froze. You knew James is stealing from the company, and you knew. It's not stealing, he said, voice tired. It's an investment. James needed leverage to prove his worth to the Caldwell family. It's for the future. I stared at him. Future. You mean their future. Money from deals. I negotiated profits I preserved, and you let him bleed it dry to look impressive. He didn't answer. You don't get it, Maria, he muttered. You see numbers. But business is also relationships, alliances. And what am I in this alliance, Dad? A-line item to write off. Silence. I walked out, my hands clutching the evidence my heart fractured. But in my mind, something had clicked into place. This wasn't favoritism. This was betrayal, and I wouldn't let them bury me quietly. That night after confronting my father, I returned to the office. The building was quiet, long since emptied out. Just me, a soft glow from my desk lamp, and the hum of betrayal still ringing in my ears. I powered up my computer and pulled up the documents I'd negotiated myself, including the one that mattered most now, the exclusive contract between Matthews & Sons and Caldwell Properties renewed 3 months ago. I remembered that negotiation vividly. I had been tough. Something about the way Richard Caldwell smiled had made my instincts bristle. I had insisted on protective language, written it myself. And there it was. Section 17, subsection C. In the event of significant organizational restructuring, ownership change, or merger activity involving either party, this agreement may be terminated with 30 days' notice by either the CEO or CFO of either entity. My eyes locked on one phrase, CFO. That was me. I could terminate this contract, alone, immediately. I laughed, not from joy, but from the irony of it all. While they plotted behind my back, while they seated me with the help, while they counted on me quietly disappearing, they forgot who wrote the very contracts they were depending on. They thought I worked behind the scenes. They forgot that those of us behind the scenes see everything. I printed the agreement, highlighted the clause, and locked it in my private safe. As I stepped out into the cool Austin night, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Power. Tomorrow I would stop being invisible. Tomorrow I would begin to strike back. That Monday, I sent a notice to Matthews & Sons Board emergency meeting. 9 UA0 AM. Subject: irregular financial activity with serious corporate risk. I didn't include details. I wanted the truth laid bare in real time in front of everyone. At 9:00 sharp, the boardroom was full. My father sat at the head of the table trying to appear calm, but he looked like a man carrying too much weight. The seat beside him, usually reserved for James, was empty. I stood. These were the people who had once seen me as the numbers girl, as background. I looked them all in the eye. Thank you all for coming. I know this is unexpected, but what I'm about to present impacts the survival of Matthews and Sons. I handed out the folders I'd prepared. Inside, evidence of James's $2 million in transfers to a private holding company. Tracing of those funds into Caldwell Properties investments. A draft merger agreement making Matthews a subsidiary, stripping us of real autonomy. Financial projections showing executive displacement across the board. The room fell silent. I could hear someone exhale sharply. When I looked up, some board members looked stunned, others deeply alarmed. My father sat motionless. This isn't just unethical. I said clearly it's a breach of financial oversight and fiduciary duty. And the worst part? It was done behind the back of the person who kept this company afloat, me. Just then the door burst open. James stormed in, flushed and breathless. What the hell is going on here? I faced him calmly. I'm presenting evidence to the board about your embezzlement and the planned hostile takeover of Matthews and Sons by Caldwell Properties. You don't have the authority. I held up the termination letter, voice firm. I'm the CFO. This morning, I signed to terminate our exclusive contract with Caldwell Properties, effective in 30 days per the clause I negotiated. The room erupted in whispers and stunned murmurs. For the first time in my life, I wasn't James's shadow. I was the one holding the trigger. Silence swept across the boardroom. All eyes turned to my father, Thomas Matthews, the founder, the pillar, the man whose signature once meant everything. He stared at the documents in front of him, the proof, the numbers, the reality. Then slowly he stood. And for the first time in years, I saw the full weight of age settle on his shoulders. I was wrong, he began, voice rough. I thought I was doing what was best for the company, for James's future. But I didn't see, Maria, what you've done for this place. The room held its breath. I wasn't sure I believed what I was hearing. James jumped in, desperate to regain control. Dad, I was just following the plan. Vanessa and her father said this merger was the next step, but my father raised his hand. James, he said firmly, locking eyes with his son, you let your sister be seated in the kitchen at your own wedding. And you said nothing. Dead silence. James flushed, stumbling. That wasn't my call. Vanessa handled the seating, but you allowed it. My father's voice had returned, not frail, but full of weight, of consequence. Maria is my daughter, the one who saved this company time and time again, and I let her be dismissed, diminished, as if she didn't matter. My throat tightened, not in anger, but because I had waited so long for this moment. Then he turned to the board. I support Maria's decision. We will not merge with Caldwell Properties. We will not sell the Matthews name for convenience. And finally, he looked at me, with gratitude in his eyes. If anyone in this room still doubts her ability, look at how she just protected every one of us. I didn't speak. I didn't need to, because for the first time I wasn't invisible. I was seen, truly seen. After that board meeting, I thought the dust would begin to settle. I was wrong. 3 days later, Caldwell Properties filed a lawsuit against Matthews and Sons, citing breach of contract, business interference, and unethical conduct. They demanded millions in damages. The same people we caught red-handed were now flipping the narrative. Word spread like wildfire through Austin's real estate circles. Investors grew skittish. Clients called with questions. Subcontractors connected to the Caldwells backed out of our projects. But the deepest cut didn't come from outside. It came from my mother. She showed up at the office, cold, controlled, her eyes brimming with disappointment. You've destroyed everything, Maria. I looked at her steady. I protected this company. You tore this family apart. James lost his wife. Your father is exhausted. Her voice was sharp as broken glass. I swallowed. Did you ever think about me, Mom? When I was left out of family events, out of board meetings, out of the wedding photos when I was seated in the kitchen, she didn't answer. "You've always been the smart one," she said finally, "but you didn't have to blow everything up just to prove it." I went still. Maybe to her I was wrong because I refused to stay silent. That night, I got a call from my assistant there had been an attempt to breach our internal server. Anonymous complaints had been filed with the state financial board. Employees close to James had resigned abruptly, some walking out with sensitive data. This wasn't over, not even close. James had disappeared. Rumor was he was holed up in a lakeside hotel. Vanessa had filed for divorce, triggering a morality clause in their prenup and demanding half his Matthews & Sons shares. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. My family was breaking. Our company was surrounded. And my father, though he had backed me, was fading before my eyes. I stood in the parking lot looking up at our office building. On the outside, it looked the same. But inside, the walls were crumbling. The call came at 5 a.m. "Mr. Matthews has been rushed to the ER. Respiratory failure, critically low blood pressure." I didn't grab a coat. I didn't even think. I drove like a ghost through the sleeping streets of Austin. When I arrived, my father was already hooked up to wires and machines. The room was cold and sterile, but his eyes were still alert. James and my mother were already there, seated silently on either side of the bed. When I walked in, my father turned his head toward me. A weak smile tugged at his lips. "Now, we're all here," he rasped, barely above a whisper. I took his hand, cold but firm. "Maria," he whispered, "I signed the revised will yesterday." I froze. "The company, it's yours now. Full authority after I'm gone. James keeps shares, but no voting power. It's done." Tears blurred my vision. Not for control, not for the title, but because finally he had given me his trust fully. James said nothing, but I saw his jaw tighten. My mother turned away, wiping tears, but did not object. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice breaking now, "for not seeing you sooner, for letting you carry so much. Alone." I couldn't speak. I just held his hand tighter. I wanted him to feel even now I forgave him. He closed his eyes, breathing labored. Still he whispered, "Keep Matthews & Sons true to its name. And don't forget, you deserve every bit of what you've earned." 1 week later, my father passed away. At his funeral, I stood between 2 rows of mourners, shaking hands, accepting condolences not just as Thomas Matthews' daughter, but as the rightful heir to everything he built. I had lost my father, but I had reclaimed the legacy. 3 months after the funeral, I stood once again in the top-floor boardroom, the same room where I once sat in the corner, underestimated, unseen. Now I sat at the head of the table. Matthews & Sons was no longer a family-run business running on sentiment. It was a company with vision, structure, and values, and I, Maria Matthews, was the one guiding it forward. We had survived the storm. The Caldwell lawsuit was dismissed, lack of standing, conflict of interest, and public scrutiny. Richard Caldwell was ousted by his own board. Vanessa vanished from the scene, and their once great empire was sold off piece by piece. I didn't gloat. I simply exhaled. James returned to work not as a VP, but as a client relations coordinator, a role that matched his true strength, empathy, rapport, and connection. For the first time, I saw humility in him and growth. My mother. She still struggled with the idea of her daughter being in charge, but she no longer denied it. She now ran our charitable foundation, building the kind of community programs my father always dreamed of. That night I sat alone in my office watching the Austin skyline sparkle. I remembered the wedding night, the burgundy dress, the chair in the kitchen, the eyes that dismissed me. And I remembered the contract I'd written, the one clause that turned everything around. They had mistaken my silence for weakness. They forgot that I wrote the foundation and I could rebuild it stronger. I stood and walked to the window. In the distance, our first new project under my leadership rose against the night, the Thomas Matthews Community Center, a training and mentorship hub for aspiring builders and young tradespeople. Legacy isn't just what you leave behind. It's what you fight to protect.